My name is Andrew Kessler. I'm 55 years old, and until the night of November 17th, I thought I knew how to tell a drowned man from a living one. Marcus Doyle came into my ER with no usable pulse, full of seawater, and yet he only began to die when we tried to dry him off. Now his test results have been wiped. The Coast Guard denies the wreck ever happened, and yesterday they brought in another survivor. She opened her eyes, black as low tide, and said, "Don't rescue us." Since then, I've been hearing the tide inside the walls. I work emergency in Brindle Cove, a small harbor town in Maine that smells of diesel, rotting seaweed, and reheated coffee from October through April. We're not a big hospital. We have 6 observation beds, 1 trauma room, a lab that works when the generator feels like cooperating, and a helipad the wind makes useless for half the winter. At night, we are the only thing standing between the sea and Portland. At 2:14 in the morning, my pager woke me. I was in the break room, boots still on, my coat folded under my head. The storm was hitting the windows like gravel. Fire radio had been talking for an hour about flares seen east of Gull Ledge, where the charts show enough rocks to split a hull open like a tin can. When I answered, Marnie's voice, our dispatcher, didn't sound tired. It sounded afraid. "Dr. Kessler, Coastal Rescue is coming in with a male. Sole recovery from the St. Elian, mid-30s, unconscious, possible severe hypothermia. ETA 7 minutes." The St. Elian was an old fishing schooner with a green hull, owned by the Doyle family. I'd stitched up half her crew over the last 15 years. Marcus was the youngest, 34, sailor's shoulders, hands always open as if he were still gripping a line. He wasn't my friend, but in a town like this, patient means neighbor. I prepped room 1 with Lena, my night nurse. Fluid warmer, thermal blankets, oxygen, intubation kit, monitor, intraosseous line. I did what you do with a body the sea gives back too late. Keep your hands moving, imagine nothing. Don't look too closely at the soaked clothing. The ambulance came sideways into the bay. 2 paramedics lowered the stretcher. Marcus was covered with an orange tarp. Sand clung to his face, his lips were blue, and his hair was tangled with transparent strands that looked like fishing line. The portable monitor showed an irregular slow line, almost a whim of electricity. "We found him in the surf at Black Pine," Tom Avery said. "He wasn't breathing when we pulled him out. Started again in the ambulance." I cut away his jacket, thermal shirt, and boots. Water poured off him onto the floor. His skin was cold but not rigid. Core temperature, 30.1 degrees Celsius. Pulse, 28. Pressure, 70/40, then nothing reliable. Pupils huge. His eyelids trembled like he was dreaming. 100% oxygen, 2 lines, warm saline. "Lena, call Portland and tell them we'll transfer as soon as the wind opens up." She obeyed. I fitted the mask. In the first 30 seconds, Marcus got worse, not gradually. The tracing dropped, his saturation fell from 72 to 59, and the skin of his chest turned gray. I pulled the mask away to reposition his airway, and then he breathed better. It was a wet inhalation, as if air hurt him, but the lack of air hurt less. I thought, pulmonary edema, aspiration, neurological injury, any word that could keep the world in order. I asked for the laryngoscope. I opened his mouth. At the back of his throat there was movement that should not have existed, 2 pale folds opening and closing with a rhythm of their own. I said nothing. In emergency medicine, there are moments when silence keeps the room alive. Lena tripped over the rescue bag. Seawater spilled out of the plastic and soaked Marcus's bare side. The monitor gave 3 clean beeps. His pressure rose. His saturation, without oxygen, climbed from 59 to 68. Lena looked up. I looked at the puddle, then at the wet skin, then at the cardiac tracing. "Bring more water," I said. "Water?" "From the harbor. Salt water. Clean containers. Now." It was not an order I could justify. It was the first lie I told medicine that night. If you're listening to this and it's still showing up on your screen, help me keep them from burying it. Leave a like, subscribe, and keep this recording visible before someone decides Marcus Doyle never came into my ER. I am not an easy man to impress. Before Brindle Cove, I worked 9 years with the Coast Guard. I've seen hands crushed by winches, lungs full of fuel, boys who survived 40 minutes under freezing water. The sea does strange things to the human body, but it always collects its due under the same laws. That is why I clung to those laws during the first 20 minutes with Marcus. Severe hypothermia, saltwater aspiration, possible head trauma, cold-induced arrhythmia. I wrote those words on the board as if they could force him to behave. Lena placed a second line. Tom squeezed a ventilation bag without sealing the mask, only bringing oxygen near the mouth because every attempt to cover his nose and lips made him crash. It was absurd. A drowned man does not improve when you remove respiratory support. Marcus lay naked under thermal blankets, but his skin refused warmth. Wherever we covered him, it turned ashen. Wherever it stayed wet, it kept something close to a human color. We soaked gauze in saline and laid it over his chest, neck, and abdomen. He improved a little. Then 2 aides arrived carrying buckets of harbor water filtered through a coffee mesh. Under any other circumstances, I would have fired someone for doing that. That night, I told them to keep going. When we poured the first liter over his torso, Marcus arched his back. It wasn't a seizure. It was relief. His breathing went from 17 agonized efforts to 6 slow movements. The monitor found a rhythm, 32 beats per minute, stable. By any healthy standard, he was still dead, but he was no longer leaving. I drew blood from the femoral artery. The sample came out dark and thick, not clotted, but with a viscosity that resisted the syringe. I held it up to the light. It had a faint greenish tint like water over copper. I ordered blood gas, electrolytes, CBC, basic toxicology. Our lab couldn't process everything, but it could give me enough numbers to know whether the machine was frightened too. While we waited, I checked his eyes. In the ER, you learn to read pupils the way you read weather on the horizon. Under the pen light, Marcus's pupils constricted only at the rim, leaving an enormous black center. In dim light, they expanded until they covered almost the entire iris. The shine they returned was neither red nor white, but silver, like certain fish beside the dock. "Brain injury?" Lena asked. "Maybe." It was a coward's answer. There was no visible trauma except a bruise over the right temple, nothing that explained the rest. I palpated his ribs. No fractures. Abdomen soft. He had small marks on both sides of his chest, below the armpits, symmetrical, 5 thin cuts on each side. They looked as if they had been made by long fingers, or by an instrument I did not know. Salt moisture seeped from them, not blood. Portland called back. The coordinator wanted him evacuated the moment the wind dropped. I gave her the details I could say without sounding insane. Hypothermic male, post-immersion, unstable for transport, continuous monitoring. I left out that air was killing him. I left out that warmth grayed his skin. I left out that the folds in his throat opened when water touched his neck. "Andrew," the coordinator said, "if he's that unstable, that's exactly why we need to move him. If you move him, he'll die before he's out of town." Silence. Then she asked for updates every 15 minutes. I agreed and hung up. My wife, Claire, drowned in 2011, 100 meters from a calm beach. I was a rescue doctor and I couldn't bring her back. Since then, every wet body brings some part of her with it. With Marcus, I tried not to mix memory with fact. The lab printed the first results at 302, sodium 181, pH incompatible with normal neurological activity, lactate almost non-existent, hemoglobin altered, reading uninterpretable. The machine flagged an error twice before giving partial numbers. A person with those values should not have moved a finger. Marcus moved his hand. It was barely a closing of fingers around the soaked sheet, then another. Then his head turned toward the side where, beyond the hospital walls, the harbor lay. His lips parted. No word came out. What came out was a low, wet sound, too long for his lungs. We froze. There was pain in that sound, yes, but there was also direction. It was an answer to something none of us had heard yet. At 3:18, I ordered the automatic ER doors closed. I said it was to conserve heat. That was a lie. Heat was the last thing I wanted. I needed time without neighbors coming in with blankets, questions, and phones. Brindle Cove lives on knowing everything before it is finished happening. Lena brought a pediatric tub from storage. It wasn't meant for adults, but it had a drain and high sides. We filled it with seawater at 8 degrees because every attempt to warm it made Marcus agitated. We placed compresses on his neck, ribs, and groin. I kept the monitor, the line, and a temperature probe in place. There was no dignity in it, only survival. The change was measurable. 2 minutes after sustained contact with salt water, his heart rate dropped to 26, but perfusion improved. The blue left his fingernails. His pressure stabilized at 94/56. His saturation remained low on the finger monitor, but when I took an arterial gas, the dissolved oxygen was higher than the pulse oximeter could explain. It was as if the blood wasn't using the same method to carry gases anymore. "Tell me this has an explanation," Tom said. "Not yet." "That isn't a no." "No." Lena looked at me with anger and pleading in her eyes. "Andrew, we have to call someone." "We already called Portland." "I mean someone real." I understood what she meant. The CDC, the Navy, some federal lab. But Marcus was still there, his chest moving under my hands. He was not a specimen. He was a patient. Until I knew what was keeping him alive, handing him over was an elegant way of killing him. I sent Tom to rest and told Lena to chart only what was essential. In the official record, we wrote, "Post-immersion hypothermia, modified interventions due to intolerance of conventional support." In my personal notebook, I wrote, "Dry air worsens, seawater improves, heat worsens, bright light causes distress, hypersaline blood, response toward harbor." At 3:41, Marcus opened his eyes. He did not fully wake. It was worse than that. His eyelids lifted and his eyes searched the room without finding it. The pupil took up almost everything. The iris, once light brown, now had a gray-green rim. When Lena approached with the penlight, Marcus turned his head with a speed impossible for someone hypothermic. He didn't attack. He only turned his face away from the beam. "Marcus," I said, leaning in, "I'm Andrew Kessler. You're in the ER. Your boat wrecked." His gaze fixed on my mouth. He seemed to recognize the movement of words after a delay. Then he tried to breathe air. One inhalation. The monitor screamed. His back tightened and the folds in his throat clamped shut. I poured water over his neck. The sound stopped. The rhythm returned. "Don't talk," I said, though he had not spoken. His right hand rose out of the water. His fingers were wrinkled from immersion, but not like a castaway's. The skin between them looked stretched, as if something had pushed it outward from inside. I told myself it was edema. Marcus touched his chest, pointed toward the door, toward the harbor. Then he struck the edge of the tub once. Lena whispered, "He wants out. He doesn't know where he is." Marcus struck again, once, twice, 3 times. It was not panic, it was insistence. At 4:05, the Coast Guard station called. Petty Officer Bram Whitlock, an old acquaintance of mine, spoke without a greeting. "Doc, is Doyle still alive?" "Yes. I need to know if he said anything." "He's unconscious." Bram breathed too carefully on the other end. "We found wreckage from the St. Elian to the north. The hull split, but there's something strange in the forward compartment. I don't want to put it on the radio." "Bodies?" "We haven't found bodies, just clothing, boots, belts, things people were wearing." A clean cold opened behind my sternum. I looked at Marcus. His eyes were still open. "What else?" I asked. "There are marks on the inside of the metal, like someone wanted out of the boat, or in. I don't know which option I like less." The line crackled. Behind his voice came a low sound. It was not wind. It was the same tone Marcus had made before, deep and grave. In the tub, his chest responded under the skin. "Bram," I said slowly, "turn off the speaker." "What?" "Turn it off now." He did. The sound vanished. Marcus closed his eyes, but not like someone losing consciousness, like someone listening better from the inside. That was when I understood the first true rule of that night. The water was not only keeping him alive, it was also keeping him connected. At 4:27, I moved Marcus to the isolation room. It had a floor drain, dimmable lights, and a door that could be locked without raising suspicion. Lena and I pushed the stretcher while the tub overflowed at every turn. The hallway smelled of brine and disinfectant. The room had an emergency shower. I removed the nozzle, connected a hose, and ordered more seawater brought in jugs. We mixed it with ice until it was down to 5 degrees. Marcus improved in the cold. He improved by criteria that were no longer human. Less lung breathing, lower temperature, less pain response, more stability. When I removed a compress from his left side, I saw that the 5 marks beneath his armpit had changed. They were no longer cuts. The edges had separated into clean pink lines with a thin membrane trembling inside. Whenever water passed over them, the membrane opened slightly. Whenever air touched them, it stuck shut and darkened. I stared too long. "Andrew," Lena said, "I see it." "No, look at me." I raised my head. Her eyes were full of tears and fury. "That is not a wound." I didn't answer. I put the stethoscope to the folds. Under the skin, I heard a soft murmur, not cardiac, not intestinal, like water entering a grate. Then I listened to his chest. The lungs were still there, full of crackles, but the primary exchange seemed to have moved. The body was opening another route. I ordered a portable X-ray. While we waited, I cleaned one mark with sterile gauze. Marcus reacted. His fingers closed around my wrist with a strength that did not match his blood pressure. He did not break anything. He only held me. His eyes opened. There was focus. "Marcus," I said, "I need to help you." His lips moved, one voiceless syllable, then another. Lena leaned in. "No," he said, or something close enough that we both understood it. The X-ray arrived at 4:52. Evan, the tech, came in half asleep and left wide awake. He didn't see the marks because we covered them, but he saw enough. The body too cold, water on the floor, monitors with their alarms silenced because no standard limit meant anything. I took the chest X-ray in silence. The image appeared on the portable screen after a delay. At first, I thought it was artifact. Then I enlarged it. The lungs were compressed toward the center, not collapsed, but displaced by new tissue along the thoracic walls. Branching structures ran out between the ribs like roots. Not bone, not tumor. Something vascular, symmetrical, growing inward from the lateral marks. In the neck, behind the larynx, the pharyngeal folds formed impossible chambers. Evan whispered, "Is it cancer?" "No one repeats this image outside this room," I said. I drew another blood sample. Under the skin, the vessel moved away from the needle. It was not a spasm. It retreated like a worm under soil. I took a deep breath, waited, and punctured higher up. The blood came out lighter than before, with microbubbles that did not rise. When it touched the air, it formed a shiny film over the tube. The lab failed again. Lena centrifuged it manually. The plasma did not separate the way it should. There was a gray, fibrous layer that contracted when we tapped the tube. I put a drop on a slide. Under the microscope, I saw deformed human cells and living filaments attached to the blood cells without destroying them. They looked as if they were teaching the cells another function. I cut a tiny piece of that layer with a needle and placed it in normal saline. It shrank until it went still. Then I added a drop of seawater. The filament opened, spread branching threads, and searched the edge of the drop as if tracking a current. It did not consume. It organized. When I returned to the room, Marcus was awake again. His mouth was half open, producing a sound that was almost inaudible, more vibration than voice. The water in the tub trembled in concentric waves. Lena stood beside him, pale. "He's answering something," she said. I turned off every machine one by one. Auxiliary monitor, fluorescence, warmer, radio. The vibration continued. It came from outside, very low, crossing the building from the shore. We did not hear it with our ears, we felt it in our teeth. Marcus turned his head toward me. This time he spoke with effort, separating every word as if pulling it out of somewhere far too deep. Wait. He lost consciousness, and the membranes at his sides opened beneath the water like sick flowers. Bram Whitlock arrived just before 6, soaked up to the knees and wearing the face of a man who had seen too much. He didn't come through the main entrance. He knocked at the ambulance exit and waited for me to open it. He held a clear evidence bag against his chest as if he wanted to throw it into the sea. "I need to see him," he said. "He's unstable. I'm not asking permission as an officer." That was as close as Bram could come to saying he was afraid. I took him to the supply office, not to Marcus. Inside the bag were a waterproof notebook, a deck knife, a plastic rosary, and a portable radio covered with a translucent crust. I recognized the notebook. Marcus always carried it in his bibs. "We found it in a tackle box," Bram said, "floating inside the cabin. The rest of the boat is wrong." "Define wrong." There's seaweed where seaweed can't be, grown inside the engine, in the machine room, in the hinges, like the boat had been underwater for months, not 3 hours. I opened the notebook with gloves on. The first pages were normal: coordinates, fishing grounds, ice prices. Then the handwriting changed. Day 1, knocking under the hull, not whale. Day 2, lights to the east against the current. Day 3, Caleb heard his name from the bilge, don't tell the others. Day 4, nets came up empty but weighed like a body. When cut, they bled. Last page, if we come back without everyone, don't believe the one who breathes better in water. I read that line 3 times. Bram took out the portable radio. It was on with no battery, recorded something. We listened to 10 seconds and 2 men vomited, not because of the sound, because of the pressure in their heads. We went to the break room and set the volume to minimum. At first, there was static and wind. Then, men's voices on deck, Caleb swearing, Marcus ordering them to release a net, a bilge water alarm. Then, a long impact against metal. Not an explosion. Contact. Something dragging itself across the hull from underneath. A voice, maybe Marcus's, said, "Don't look through the hatches." Then the sound came. It was low, choral, too organized to be animal. It had layers, fine clicks, long tones, a pulse that seemed to imitate the human heart until it corrected it. By the 3rd second, I felt nauseated. Bram stopped the playback. In the hallway, across the building, Marcus answered. We did not hear it as a voice. The floor vibrated. A tray fell in nursing. Lena screamed my name. We ran. In isolation, the water was moving though no one touched it. Marcus was half sitting, held by soft restraints. His eyes were open toward the wall facing the harbor. From his throat came the same pattern as the radio, but weaker, still human. Bram went still. Holy God. Get out of here, I said. No. Bram, Marcus is still unconscious and you haven't seen anything. He looked at me as if I were the danger. At 6:22, expanded blood results came in from the samples I had sent before I could stop myself. They were incomplete, but they were enough to trigger alarms in some outside system. 5 minutes later, a blocked number called. "Dr. Kessler," said a man with no local accent, "this is Samuel Voss, regional consultant in marine exposures. We understand you have a post-wreck patient with unusual electrolyte abnormalities." I had given no report to anyone with that level of detail. "Who referred you?" "Your laboratory transmits to a state network. We'll be arranging specialized transport. The patient can't tolerate transport. We'll determine that. I need your credentials in writing. They're already on the way. In the meantime, take no further samples and allow no family contact." I looked out the window. A black van was crossing the empty parking lot, too slowly to be casual. Behind it, dawn was starting to pale over the harbor. The gulls were not coming down to feed. They stood still on the rooftops, watching the water. I hung up without saying goodbye. When I returned, Marcus had his hand pressed to the interior glass. He wasn't looking at Bram or Lena. He was looking at me. He moved his lips. It took me a moment to understand because the sounds were breaking apart. "No. Big hospital." Then he pointed at the soaked notebook on the table, as if he knew we had read it, and formed another sentence with an effort that made him bleed water. "They didn't kill everyone." In that moment, we all thought the same thing. Maybe the St. Elian had not gone down by accident. Maybe it had been returned opened, like an empty box. Nora Doyle arrived at 6:48 with her coat buttoned wrong. She had driven from Rockland because someone told her her brother was alive. Nora was 6 years older than Marcus, a teacher, steady voice, eyes from the same family. She was not easy to lie to. "I want to see him," she said at reception. My hands were stained with iodine and salt when I came out. Behind her, 2 fishermen waited for news. The St. Elian had carried 5 men. Only Marcus was breathing, if that was breathing. "Nora, he's critical." "I don't care. You can't go in right now." "Andrew, I identified my father in a black bag. Don't talk to me like a child." That cut through me. Her father had died of a heart attack on deck in 2018. In small towns, every secret steps on a known grave. I took her to the office, not the room. I explained what I could: hypothermia, immersion injury, respiratory anomalies, isolation. She listened without blinking. When I finished, she said, "Is he suffering?" The correct answer would have been, "I don't know." I said, "Yes." Her face broke, but only for a second. "Is he going to live?" I looked toward the hallway door. I don't know what living means for him now. Nora did not ask anything immediately. She understood that it was not a poetic sentence. I showed her Marcus through the inner glass with the light low. We'd covered the marks with wet gauze. Even so, his skin looked different, smoother, tighter, with a faint shine under the water. Nora placed her hand on the glass. "Marcus," she said. At first, he did not react. Then his eyes moved. As if surfacing from very far down, he recognized her. His right hand came out of the water and touched the glass. His fingers left a wet print with fine webbing between them. Nora inhaled sharply. She did not scream. "What happened to him?" she asked. "I don't know all of it. But you know more than you're saying." I nodded. Marcus tried to speak. His mouth opened and closed with difficulty. The words came out broken, full of liquid. "Don't let them dry me." Nora turned to me. "Who wants to dry him?" Before I could answer, the front door sounded. Lena appeared in the hall. "Andrew, there are 2 men asking for you. They're from the state." I saw them on the camera. Dark suits under expensive parkas, clean boots, badges hung too late. One was tall and bald. The other carried a portable cooler for samples. Neither looked as though he had ever run across a wet dock. I asked Bram to stay with Nora. Then I went to reception. "Dr. Kessler," the bald man said. "Samuel Voss. This is Harlan Pike. We will be taking custody of patient Doyle and all biological samples." "By what authority?" He showed me a document with state and federal seals. It also had mistakes. Our hospital listed as Brindle County, which does not exist. The admission time recorded 10 minutes before Marcus was found. "Your paperwork travels through time," I said. Voss did not smile. "There are protocols for uncatalogued exposures. You do not have the facilities." "Correct. I also don't have a diagnosis or stability for transport." "Doctor, this is not a consultation." Behind me, Nora stepped into the hallway. "I'm his next of kin." Voss looked at her as if a piece of furniture had spoken. "Mrs. Doyle, your brother may have been exposed to marine toxins. We must limit contact." "My brother told me not to let them dry him." Voss's expression changed very little. It was recognition, not surprise. He already knew Marcus might say that. "He has spoken?" he asked. No one answered. From isolation came a strike against the glass, then another. I ran. Marcus was upright, tearing off electrodes. The membranes in his sides were opening and closing beneath the gauze. The water had gone milky. On the monitor, his rhythm was dropping. Voss entered behind me without permission and stopped pretending he had come about a toxin. "He's more advanced than we expected," he said. I heard him. So did Nora. "More advanced?" I asked. Voss looked at the tub, the jugs, the compresses. "You accelerated the adaptation by maintaining the correct medium." He did not say illness. Marcus lifted his head, his eyes focused on Voss, and for the first time I saw pure fear in his changed face. "Andrew," he said, almost voiceless. It was my name, not doctor, not help, my name like a rope. I closed the door from inside and jammed the latch with a metal chair. Voss struck the glass. "Open this now." I looked at Marcus, then Nora. "I need to know what he wants before anyone else decides." Nora wiped her tears with her sleeve. "Ask him." Asking Marcus seemed simple until I tried. His mouth no longer obeyed well. Every word cost him a drop on the monitors. I ended up using a whiteboard, yes or no questions, and the only part of his body that still coordinated precisely. His right hand. "Pain?" I wrote. He touched yes. "Chest?" "No." "Throat?" "No." "Skin?" He hesitated. Then yes. "Air?" "Yes." He struck twice, hard. Voss remained on the other side of the glass with Pike talking on the phone. Bram had positioned himself between them and Nora. Lena watched the hallway door with an expression that was no longer fear, but resolve. Some nights, a team forms without orders. I wrote, "What did they do to you?" Marcus closed his eyes. The water in the tub trembled. For a moment I thought he was leaving us. Then he raised his hand and pointed at the harbor, then at his own chest, then at the word water on the board. "We don't have words for this," I said. He opened his eyes and slowly and painfully wrote with his wet finger on the plastic, "They heal." Nora made a choked sound. "Heal what?" Marcus looked toward her. There was humanity in that look, trapped inside another physiology. He wrote, "AIR." We did not understand, or we did not want to. I took the transparent fibers from his hair and clothing. I needed to do something with my hands to keep from collapsing. Under the microscope, those fibers were not seaweed. They had internal channels, regular nodes, and microscopic cilia. Dry, they folded shut. In seawater, they opened. When I put my phone nearby to record, it vibrated before it touched the table. The radio file from the St. Elian was still on Bram's device. I should not have played it near the sample. I did. At the first tone, the fibers oriented toward the speaker. All at once. In the room, Marcus answered from the tub with a low sound. The fibers contracted in time with his voice. It was communication, or control, or both. Lena looked through the eyepiece and stepped back. "That's alive." "Yes." "Inside him too." I didn't answer because the answer was under his skin. I went back to Marcus. "Are they inside you?" He touched yes. "Are they using you?" "No." "Are they changing you?" "Yes." "Do you want us to stop it?" His hand hung suspended. That pause was worse than any image. He looked at Nora, then toward the harbor. He touched no. Nora leaned against the wall. "Marcus, no." He grew agitated. The monitor fell. I poured water over his neck and the membranes opened. When he could move his hand again, he wrote, "Too late." "Dr. Kessler, that organism does not belong to him." I opened the door a crack. "Organism?" His jaw hardened. "You knew what it was before you arrived," I said. "You knew it was an adaptation. Tell me who else has seen this." "Step aside." "No." "Then you are obstructing federal containment." "I am treating a conscious patient who refuses transport." Voss lowered his voice. "That man can no longer consent in any legal sense," Marcus heard. He raised his hand with difficulty and struck the edge of the tub once, then again. Nora knelt beside him. "I hear you," she said. He wrote on the board, shaking, "I am not cargo." Nora began to cry silently. "You never were." Then he added, "They won't wait long." I asked him who. Marcus closed his eyes. The water vibrated with a deep pulse. Waves appeared on the surface that did not come from his body. They came from below or from far away, though we were inside a building on solid ground. Then Marcus spoke. Not in a normal voice. The words vibrated in my chest. "They are not fish. They are not ghosts. They are before." Nora held his hand. "Before what?" Marcus swallowed air and suffered for it. "Before us." The silence that followed was different. Even the alarm seemed too human, too small. Marcus continued, each phrase torn out of 2 respiratory systems. "They have heard us forever. Boats, nets, bones, blood in water. They think we came back sick to land. They think they are helping." "Helping who?" I asked, his eyes fixed on mine. "The ones the sea does not want to lose." Then his body arched and the lateral marks opened. He did not bleed. The water filled with shining filaments that poured out of him like roots searching for current. Nora screamed his name. I held him by the shoulders. Under my hands, his skin no longer had a human temperature. It had the temperature of deep tide. I understood then that my treatment was not saving Marcus from the change. I was helping him finish it. At 7:36, the hospital stopped being a hospital and became a place under siege. Voss made a call I could not hear, and 10 minutes later the roof repeater began to fail. First, the data went. Then, the outside lines. Then, the cameras died. Everything that could tell the story began to go mute. Voss and Pike stopped pretending to be polite. They demanded the samples, the notebook, the audio, and access to the patient. When I refused, Pike opened a case containing sedatives and a thermal bag. It was not equipment meant to protect Marcus. It was equipment meant to keep him alive just long enough to carry him away. "If you take him out of that water, he decompensates," I said. Voss closed the case calmly. "Yes." That ended any remaining doubt. They had not come to save him. They had come to contain the result before he spoke anymore. I locked Voss and Pike in the corridor using the fire doors. Bram helped without asking. It would not hold them long, but it gave us minutes. Lena took Nora aside and explained what we needed. Family decision, patients' wishes, witnesses. It was absurd while Marcus was changing in front of us, but Lena knew that even the end of the world needs documentation. I leaned over Marcus. If you stay here, they'll come for you. If I transfer you to Portland, same thing. There is another option, but I need you to understand what it means. Marcus opened his eyes. Water, he said. Yes, going back to the water. Nora stood. You can't ask him that. I'm not asking him. I'm asking what he wants. She hit my chest with both hands, not hard, but with everything she had. He's my brother. I know. Then cure him. I didn't know what to say. That is what we do with the people we love. We demand that the body obey our love. But Marcus's body was obeying something else now, and that something had rules of its own. Marcus lifted his hand. Nora took it. He wrote on the board, trembling. If I stay, they break me. Who? She asked. Them? Marcus shook his head. He pointed at Voss, then at me, then at the room, the lights, the blankets, the tubes. Us. Nora understood. She did not accept it, but she understood. She pressed her forehead against her brother's wet hand. Will you still be you? Marcus took too long. He wrote, not all, then added, enough. We planned like criminals because that was what we had become. The old backup ambulance was in the garage with no active GPS. We could take him to the old salt dock at Harrow Point, 12 minutes away if the roads weren't flooded. The water there was deep even at mid-tide, and the ramp would let us get the stretcher close. Bram could delay his station with a false call. Lena could alter the chart and close the admission as transfer pending. That doesn't make it legal, Lena said. No. Marcus needed a wet medium during transport. We used empty saline bags, soaked blankets, and 2 jugs with a hose. We covered the marks with saturated dressings. Every time more than 30 seconds passed without fresh water, his rhythm distorted. When liquid touched the membranes, it returned. As we prepared him, Marcus spoke in fragments. He said the St. Elian had found a living net caught on the rudder. Caleb cut it, and the net screamed through the wood of the hull. That night, something came up from below, not to sink them at first, but to recover what the net had marked. He said the others did not die quickly. He heard their names returned from the dark. Were they changed too? I asked, his eyes filled with clear secretion. Some didn't want it. Marcus looked at Nora, and his silence was answer enough. The fire door slammed. Pike was forcing it. We were running out of time. Bram came in with the ambulance keys. The rear exit's clear, but there's a van blocking the main one. We'll use the waste exit. Lena shut off the east wing lights. As we moved Marcus onto the stretcher, his back arched and I saw beneath the skin of his spine a pattern of small plates, like internal scales. Nora covered her mouth. I did not look away. Someone had to remember him. As we crossed the hallway, Voss managed to open the first door. His voice followed us. Kessler, you don't understand what you're releasing. Marcus turned his head toward him and gave the faintest smile. It was not a happy smile. It was sad, ancient. Neither, do you? He said. Then the doors closed and we went out into the rain with a man who could no longer live on land and did not know whether the sea would receive him as a son or as a warning. I drove because Bram had to stay behind and Lena couldn't leave the room. Nora rode in the back, kneeling beside the stretcher, pouring water over Marcus's neck and sides. Every bump shook him. Every jolt tore a low sound out of him that made the windows vibrate. The road to Harrow Point ran beside the water for 3 miles. The sky was a dirty gray, and the rising tide pushed brown foam over the stones. The houses had their shutters closed. The whole town seemed to be holding its breath. Talk to me, Nora said from the back. Marcus did not answer. Please, Mark, I heard his hand brush against the tarp. Then his voice, more water than air. I'm here. Nora gave a broken laugh. That's not enough. It's what I have. I didn't look in the mirror. If I did, maybe I would break. Maybe I would turn back to the hospital and let men with clean folders decide for me. I focused on the yellow line, the windshield wipers, the smell of salt filling the vehicle. Halfway there, the ambulance radio turned itself on. That should not have been possible. Lena had disconnected it. Still, static came through the speaker, then the tone. This time it was not distant. It was clear, multiple, almost choral. Marcus sat up. The restraints pulled tight. Nora screamed, "Water!" I threw the small jug back without taking my eyes off the road. She opened it and emptied half of it over his chest. Marcus stopped struggling, but his eyes stayed fixed on the rear doors, toward the sea he could not see. "They're close," he said. "Where?" I asked. "Under the channel." Harrow Point had a dredged channel for salt barges, 30 meters deep, just a few steps from the ramp. I had chosen it for that reason. In his mouth, it sounded as if someone else had chosen before me. We reached the dock at 8:03. The storm had eased, but the wind was still pushing a fine rain. The old salt warehouse had been empty for 20 years, its windows broken, its walls white as bone. I parked beside the ramp. No one was there. That frightened me more than a crowd would have. When I opened the rear doors, the smell changed. It was not only sea. There was something mineral, cold, like stone opened inside a cave. Marcus breathed once, and the sound split in his throat. The membranes at his sides opened under the dressings. Nora got out first. I released the stretcher brake. We rolled him to the ramp. The wheels caught in cracks. Marcus weighed more than before, or perhaps we had less strength left. A few meters from the water, he began to tremble. Not from cold. From recognition. The surface of the channel was too still. The wind touched it, but the ripples stopped around the ramp. Below, greenish lights moved, not like lanterns, but like organs switching on and off. Nora saw them and clenched her jaw. "Is that what called you?" Marcus barely shook his head. "Not that. Them." Then the first figure surfaced. It did not rise like a monster in a film. There was no leap, no roar, only a pale shape under the surface, an elongated face ascending until the eyes were near the air. It was almost human, and not human in every way that mattered. Smooth skin, neck with lateral openings, eyes with no whites, long hands joined by webbing. Behind it, two more appeared, then one enormous shadow. Nora backed away. I raised my hands by instinct. Marcus made a sound. The figures answered. The water vibrated around my boots. "Are they going to take you?" Nora asked. Marcus looked at her. His face had changed greatly, but the pain in it was a brother's. "If I want." That condition struck me. If I want. They were not only hunters. We helped him sit on the edge of the stretcher. His legs hung uselessly, pale, marked with new lines. He had no tail, nothing out of a storybook. He was a human body redesigned without our sense of beauty. Every second out of the water damaged him. Nora embraced him. At first, I thought Marcus would not be able to return it. Then, his arms closed around her awkwardly. She whispered in his ear, words I will not repeat. He closed his eyes. For one instant, I saw the fisherman he had been, the man who carried ice, argued over prices, and brought coffee to his sister. Then he looked at me. "Andrew," he said, "I'm here. It wasn't a wreck. I know. No. Listen." He took air and suffered. The net was a message. We cut it. A message to whom? Marcus looked at the channel, at the depth waiting for him to land. I did not understand the sentence until much later. In that moment, I only saw that Marcus was fading. The skin of his chest was cracking where air touched it. The lateral membranes were sticking shut. The monitor's rate dropped to 18. Each beat sounded separated from the next by an entire country. "We have to get him in now," I said. Nora would not let go. 1 minute. "He doesn't have 1 minute." She looked at me with a hatred I accepted. She kissed her brother's forehead and stepped back. Together, we lifted him. He weighed like a wet, living sack. Marcus could not stand. His legs gave out, but his hands found the wet ramp. He dragged himself the last few centimeters by his own will. No one pushed him. When his fingers touched the water, every light below the surface came on. It was not bright. It was deep. A clarity born underneath revealed shapes around the dock, long bodies, tilted heads, arms extended without touching him. There were at least 9. Marcus put his hands in. The change was immediate. His back stopped arching. He breathed through his sides, not his mouth, with a shudder of pain and relief. Then he slid down until the water covered his waist. The figures moved back, making room for him. He turned one last time toward us. The water reached his chest. His eyes, beneath a transparent membrane, saw us. "Thank you," he said. It was his last clear word. Then he added in English, so I would have to carry it. "Do not call it rescue." One of the figures approached, perhaps younger. It touched Marcus's shoulder with 2 long fingers. He did not pull away. Another figure raised a hand toward Nora, not in greeting, but in recognition of loss. Nora did not respond. Then, the large shadow rose a little higher. It did not surface fully. I saw only a broad face, pale scars, enormous eyes, and filaments that moved without current. When it looked at me, pressure built in my ears. It did not speak. Even so, an idea formed behind my eyes. Late. Marcus was guided toward the center of the channel. He cooperated, moving his arms, letting the body learn. His legs gave a strange jerk under the water, as if the bones remembered another design. Nora closed her eyes. I should have felt pure horror. But when Marcus hung suspended among them, his face relaxed for the first time since they had brought him in. He did not look happy. He looked free of pain. Sometimes we confuse the absence of pain with victory. That time, I did not know whether we had any right to call it comfort. The figures sank. One by one, the lights went out. Marcus remained visible for a few seconds beneath the surface. He raised a hand. Nora raised hers. Then, the channel closed. The portable monitor gave a flat line as it fell into the water. It was not his death. It was our instrument admitting it could no longer measure him. We stayed on the ramp until the rain soaked us through. Nora did not cry at first. She only watched the water. Then she said, "What if you sent him to something worse?" "I don't know. That isn't an answer I can live with." "Neither can I." When we returned to the ambulance, we found a black van on the other side of the warehouse. Voss stood beside it, wet, watching the channel. Pike was nowhere in sight. Voss did not try to stop us. His face did not show defeat, but calculation. "Do you know what you just did?" he asked. "Carried out my patient's wishes." "Your patient has just told them where we are." "Who?" Voss looked at the water. "Everyone." I wanted to hit him, to demand names, programs, files. But Nora was shaking and the ambulance could still start. I helped her into the passenger seat and drove back without looking behind us. At the hospital, Lena had closed the case as transfer canceled due to death during cardiopulmonary arrest. Bram had sent patrols to false roads. The blood samples had disappeared. My personal notebook had not. Lena had hidden it above the false ceiling in the bathroom. At 11:30, the system came back online. Marcus Doyle's records were corrupted. Only the impossible parts, the times, medications, and basic notes were still there. Any audit would see a tragic case. That precision frightened me more than a complete wipe would have. That night when I got home, I found Marcus's clothes folded on my porch. We had left them in a biohazard bag at the hospital. On top lay a piece of dry, translucent net with a tag from the St. Elian. When I touched it, it vibrated once, like a pulse. It was not a farewell. It was confirmation of delivery. The next 3 days were a choreography of denial. The Coast Guard declared all 5 crew members of the St. Elian missing, including Marcus Doyle. The local paper printed an old photo of the schooner. No one mentioned my ER or that Nora had held him at Harrow Point. She came by 2 days later with family photos to force me to remember the man, not the changing body. "If I start to doubt," she said, "tell me he asked to go." I told her he had. When she asked whether they had put that idea in his head, I did not know how to answer. On the 4th day, Bram came before dawn. He carried a USB drive inside a coffee bag. "It doesn't officially exist," he said. It was a sonar extraction from the buoy off Harrow Point, taken that morning. It showed large bodies descending through the channel. One, in the center, had a different signature, warm for water, cold for human. Its rhythm was slow, 24 pulses per minute. The trace left the range heading northeast. "Is he alive?" Bram asked. I looked at the signal. I could not call it anything else. "Yes." Bram enlarged the minutes before our arrival. Before we reached the dock, the figures were already in the channel. "They were waiting for us," he said. I thought of the radio turning itself on and the net vibrating on my porch. Maybe the order was reversed. Maybe they had been guiding us since the first bucket of water. That same day, an audit arrived over irregularities in post-wreck corpse handling, signed by a department that had not existed the week before. Lena received a call about the samples. Evan requested a transfer to Bangor. Tom Avery left a note. I heard my name on the radio. The second patient arrived 6 nights later. A truck driver found her on the coastal road, walking barefoot in the rain. Female, around 40, no identification, sand in her mouth. When the ambulance called, I already knew. 3 deep pulses sounded over the radio. We admitted her to the same room. Lena lowered the lights and asked for seawater. The woman was conscious. Her lips were split from dry air. Her eyes had the same membrane, and fresh marks lay beneath her armpits. "What's your name?" I asked. She did not answer. Her hand searched for water. We gave it to her. Her breathing stabilized. She opened her eyes and looked at me with a clarity Marcus had not had until nearly the end. "Do not rescue us," she said in imperfect Spanish. That was when I understood that Marcus was neither the first accident nor the last. She was not asking for help. She was correcting us. "Who are you?" I asked. It took her a moment. "Elena Marquez, oceanographer, Pelagos, lost 3 weeks ago." The Pelagos was not listed as lost. According to Elena, it sank where the seafloor gives off heat and the charts lie. I asked if she had seen Marcus. Her pupils widened. "New," she said, "still hurts." Nora was standing in the doorway and covered her mouth. 11 days have passed since then. Elena is still alive in an old lobster nursery Nora inherited, with large tanks and direct water from the channel. We keep her wet, cold, and off the records there. She says they do not think like individuals or like a hive. They are distributed memory: water, bone, pressure, salt. If they touch your blood, they learn your shape. If they touch your fear, they learn your name. Voss appeared in a recording the day before yesterday. Every returned subject transmits information to a non-human network. You believe you are protecting patients. In reality, you are facilitating contact. Maybe he was lying. Maybe he wasn't. This story has taken away the pleasure of knowing who the villain is. Last night, Elena's tank lit from within. The pump stopped. She opened her eyes and said, "Marcus is close to shore. He can't come up, not yet, but he remembers the way." Nora fell to her knees. This confession exists because today I received a medical suspension, a federal summons, and an obituary with my name printed as if I were already dead. Also because Elena grows worse out of the water. Soon she will ask for the same thing Marcus asked for. I do not know whether I will have the courage to do it again. I swore an oath to preserve life. That oath never explained what to do when life moves away from the species that wrote it. If this recording reached you, do not treat it like a monster story. Treat it like a case file someone wanted closed. Like it if you want it to stay visible. Subscribe before they delete the channel, and leave a comment with an answer that matters. If an intelligent being can save you from dying by changing you until you can never go home again, is that medicine, abduction, or a kind of love humans are not ready to recognize?